Jack Hager is a man who likes to operate his trains, and he's built an unusual layout that satisfies his preference for operations in a big way. Lots of trains, lots of starting and stopping, lots of action. And Jack's interest in trains started a long time ago.
My interest in trains started at the tender age of 3 or 4 when my father brought home an O-gauge demonstrator from Hager's, which was the family-owned department store, the oldest in the country. I ran this train for 4 or 5 years, did all sorts of things with it that my parents told me I shouldn't do, and thoroughly enjoyed it. And that lasted through to about age 10. Then there was a period until I got married when I was out of trains. I was in things like Korea and also learning the business. But when the first little girl came along, back in 1954, by golly, trains appeared again. And we had them for about 10 years. It was a Super O layout that I put together. And I was most unhappy with one aspect of it. I couldn't get the trains to go over the Super O switches. So when we moved, I gave it to a maintenance man. I gave away at least $10,000 that day. Then the years go by, and I become semi-retired and then retired, and needing another hobby beside ballooning, I got into trains. One Christmas Day, I saw them at a friend's house, and it sort of brought back a lot of things. And I decided to build a layout.
Jack is not afraid of a little wiring. He understands electricity better than most. A chance meeting with someone else who understands electricity blossomed into a unique approach to layout operation.
I ran into a chap who makes switches by the name of Steve Brenheisen, he was my consultant in Connecticut over the telephone. Whenever anything went the matter, I talked to him a little bit. He's the one that got me into automated operation or the use of relays. A relay is something that is tripped off by a control rail going to ground. A magnetic relay opens or closes, and then that directs electricity in a different direction, or a different wire is cut in. Like you can make your layout go dead in a spot. You can make signal lights work. The relay's use is limited only to your imagination. I also have a couple time delay relays, which are extremely nice for having the train stop at the station. I've had some help with this layout from a chap by the name of Dave Landis, particularly in landscaping, and Jim Elsner, who supplies landscape supplies, who's been very nice along the way. And I would have to credit numerous people if I really sat down and thought. But most of the work has been my blood, sweat, and occasionally tears. When you're working this automatic operation type of thing, you start to build almost a mini computer, the computer boys tell me. And there are so many wires and so many connections that crazy things happen. Down at one end of the layout, there'll be a little this or that, which will affect something at the other end of the layout. What really is fun, and you don't always have this, but when you have everything sort of in sync, when you have a few visitors, and you walk out from behind the controls and mingle amongst them while the trains are all running, maybe 8 or 10 trains in different directions, and they say, "What are you doing out here?" Sort of like an airline pilot who's deserted his cockpit.
Jack has used hundreds of relays in building his layout, and automated operation was the design goal, as opposed to more conventional methods of operation. His reasons for building a layout like this run pretty deep.
It's something that was suggested to me, and it's something that grew, and I think it reverts to a childhood like of electricity. Back in the old days, when the parents couldn't afford a Gilbert electrical set, I made a lot of the things that were in the set. I made my own little telegraph set just by winding the wire and using tin cans and things. I believe it's an extension of that. There's a particularly favorite and interesting part of the layout which just sort of happened as I was working on it. I bought a beautiful double crossover from Steve, and then I started laying it, wiring it. Heavens, you have to put about 20 wires into that double crossover. And I started to work it, and now what it does, finished, a train comes roaring up on the left side and stops automatically. Another train comes up on the right side, cuts right in front of it, and continues on. When it reaches a certain part in the curve ahead, it sends a signal on a control wire back to a relay, which then starts the train that has been automatically stopped. And they both pull in to the station about the same time, hitting the time delay relay. When the time delay relay is tripped, then a station announcement occurs on the Manhattan Limited. The Manhattan Limited is a real train that ran in the late 40s, and I took to prep school, and we have the exact wording from back at that time done by an expert.
23, the Manhattan Limited is now departing Lancaster for Chicago, Illinois, with stops at the following stations: Harrisburg, Altoona, Johnstown, Pittsburgh, Crestline, Fort Wayne, Plymouth, Gary, and Englewood. All aboard!
Get those 2 loops, 3 trains each, that's 6. You have the capacity on the lower level to put 4 on, we run 3. And then there's several other places in the layout that'll run a train. So we have capacity for 11. And you get all that going, and then dim the lights, and you just sort of get a special feeling. Another special feeling you can get, the operator can get, he can get way down at one end of the layout and hear his train coming from the other end of the layout. And that's very interesting. Or coming through the tunnel. It's an interesting sound. We have a turntable here. I tore out a perfectly good Bowser because they did not have an indexing system, and put in a diamond scale turntable. This turntable was above my modeling skill. And I had a little help again from Dave Landis. He did the stuff with some of the heavy gears, and I did most of the rest of it, the wiring and everything. We have a little corner down at the one end of the room that has been rebuilt 3 times. Never quite, it's not quite big enough to do with anything significant with. So I have turned it into a, for lack of a better word, sort of a kiddie corner. And that's set up so if some kids are here or somebody's wife wants to run a train, there it's all set up. And that keeps them away from the big tracks and away from the control panel where you don't need them.
In O-gauge railroading, there are 2 distinct types of people: those who collect trains and those who operate their trains. Jack makes no bones about which group he belongs to.
I think the trains, with the exception of a few very expensive ones, belong on the tracks. Now, I'm not going to seal them up and put them under the bed. I am going to run them. And sometimes they have some very interesting runs. I had one run off the table the other day, which should have been in the Addams family. All I needed was a good explosion. I get a tremendous enjoyment when I'm down here and things are working right. I got all the trains going with minor little things occurring, and I notice that an hour or maybe 2 hours has gone by. And to me, that is worth all the work and labor, crawling around on your knees and your back, working under the table for hours. That's all part of the fun. And as I say, the final result, the running of the train. That's what it's all about to me, the running of the train.